President Trump faces off with Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer in the Oval Office. Google goes to the Hill, and another terror attack rocks France. I'm Ben Shapiro. This is The Ben Shapiro Show. A lot of fun to be had with today's news. We will get to it in just 1 second. First, let's talk about how you can relax this holiday season. Perhaps you've been running ragged at work. Perhaps the kids are driving you nuts. Perhaps you're just stressed out or you have back pain. Well, one of the things you can do to make yourself really feel wealthy this holiday season without expending enormous sums of cash is to go check out Zeal. Zeal is the Android iPhone app, and it allows you to get a massage on demand in your home from a licensed masseuse. Just go to Zeal.com or Zeal's iPhone or Android app. That is Zeal, Zeal.com. Select from top local licensed pre-screened massage therapists. Choose your favorite technique, gender preference, time, and location for your massage. Zeal will then send one of their 10,000 licensed massage therapists with a massage table, music, and supplies to give you a 5-star massage. Scheduling, booking, payment, fast and easy. Even the tip is included. 7 days a week, 365 days a year. A Zeal massage therapist can be at your door in as little as an hour. Privacy, convenience, quality, and comfort. That's what you get with your massage on demand with Zeal. How good is Zeal? It's so good that I have used it, my wife has used it, my parents have used it, my in-laws have used it, and my sisters have used it. It is that good. Go check it out right now. Bring the spa to you. You don't have to wait in line at the spa or pay exorbitant sums of money and make a date and time with them. They come to you instead. To help you get started, our listeners get $25 off their first massage when you use promo code BEN. That's Zeal, Zeel.com, promo code BEN. Right now, go to Zeal.com, again, or that Zeal iPhone or Android app. Get a special offer when you try Zeal today. Use promo code BEN. Get $25 off your first in-home massage. It really is a fantastic thing. A luxury item that doesn't feel like you're paying luxury prices. Zeal.com, and use that promo code BEN for $25 off. Okay, so the big news yesterday, obviously, was that President Trump faced down Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer in the Oval Office. Now, I'm not a fan of these sorts of meetings. I don't know, for example, why President Trump, if he wanted to meet with the leadership of the incoming Congress, didn't meet with Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell. Why he met with Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer. You know, Chuck Schumer doesn't have tons of power in the Senate, considering that he is still in the minority. With that said, the president did something smart. President Trump did something very smart. He said, we are going to negotiate in front of these cameras. Now, Nancy Pelosi did not want to negotiate in front of the cameras. Right? She was upset about this. She said in front of Trump, I don't want to negotiate in front of the cameras. It would just be terrible. And Trump was like, I don't care. We're doing this thing. And then they just went at each other. And that was good for President Trump, I think. So President Trump did some good things and some bad things. I mean, this was case study in good Trump, bad Trump. President Trump did some good things and some bad things. The good thing that he did was he forced the Democrats to defend their position that they would never fund a border wall, that they would not fund border security, and that, in fact, they'd be willing to shut down the government in order to prevent funding for border security, because it's pretty much the only thing Democrats don't want to spend money on. They want to spend money on federal sponsorship for lesbian dance theory in college, but they don't want to spend money on supporting our southern border needs. Right? So President Trump making them say that in front of the cameras is a very good thing. A not so good thing is when the president then says, well, you know what? I'll be blamed for the shutdown. Fine, do it. Okay, the reason being, not that Republicans should fear a shutdown. I think that Republicans have always been far too afraid of a shutdown. I don't like it when Republican politicians say things like, oh, government shutdown, it would just be so terrible. Why? We've had several of them. Has anyone died? Have people been keeling over in the streets? Was there a zombie apocalypse? Was it like Shaun of the Dead? None of that happened. Okay, it wasn't 21 days later. It wasn't people just wandering the streets in bloodlust, cannibalizing one another. It wasn't the purge when there was a government shutdown. All that happened is that a few non-essential government employees didn't go to work that day. By the way, if you're a non-essential government employee, I would suggest that perhaps you shouldn't be working in the government. All of the employees at the Daily Wire are essential. Congratulations, guys, you're all essential. But if you are not, if you were a non-essential employee of the Daily Wire, you would not be working here. I don't understand why we have non-essential employees of the federal government in the first place. And whenever there's a government shutdown, we are told by the press, by the Democrats, end of the world, people will die. Not true. Mandatory government spending continues. Essential government employees in the Social Security office and Medicaid office, all those folks continue to work. It just curbs some of the activities around the fringes. So Republicans should not be so fearful of a government shutdown. And I've always been skeptical of Republicans who say, well, we really have to avoid the government shutdown. Now, with that said, your preferred strategy is this, if you're a Republican. If there's an issue that you really care about, like border security, it is, I want my budget to have border security funding in it. And I'm not signing a budget. This does not have border security funding in it. And if you are willing to shut down the government by not sending me a budget with what I want in it, well, then that's your fault, because you're now responsible for people not being able to go to work today because you wouldn't give me the funding necessary in order to secure our southern border. So the shutdown is your fault, But if it has to shut down because you're not going to fund me, well, then I guess that's your choice. Right? That's the way you play this. President Trump gets part of it, and he doesn't get part of it. So President Trump gets the part where he says, listen, I'm willing to not sign a budget if it doesn't have what I want. But then he goes further. He says, and you know what? I'll own the shutdown. I'll say it's my fault. Why would you do this? What is the logic behind doing this? So I told you, the good Trump is him facing down Pelosi and Schumer. We'll show you that in a second. But he starts off by saying, no, I'll own it. Fine. You want to say that it's my fault the government's shutting down? Okay. Why? Why would you do that? It's not, in fact, his fault if the government shuts down. It's the Democrats' fault for not passing a budget that he wants.
Chuck's problem is that, you know, when we last closed down, that was his idea. And honestly, he got killed. And so he doesn't want to own it. And I said, you know what? Rather than us debating who's owning it, I'll take it. I'll take it. If we close down the country, I will take it because we're closing it down for border security. And I think I win that every single time.
Okay, so I'm not sure that he wins it every single time, but I mean, his own logic, President Trump's own logic suggests that, you know, it'd be great if Chuck Schumer got blamed for the government shutdown. Right? He just says Chuck Schumer tried to shut down the government in order to get funding for his priorities, and then he got blamed for it, and it was a real bad move by Chuck Schumer. Why would you not just repeat this? Why not just make Chuck Schumer do it again? But instead, President Trump, because he feels the necessity to jump on every grenade, says, no, I'll own it. I want it. Just like, I'll own it. I'll put a big Trump Tower sign insignia on it. I'll plate it in gold next to my toilet. It'll be unbelievable. Again, President Trump is correct to say, I'm not going to sign a budget without border funding. He is not correct to say, I'm going to own the shutdown. That would be the fault of the Democrats. Well, Chuck Schumer then responded, and he got very upset because President Trump and Schumer really went at it in the Oval Office. And at a certain point during the conversation, President Trump went to his go-to, which is, I won, deal with it. And Chuck Schumer responded by saying, well, when you're in trouble, you just brag.
Nancy, we've gained in the Senate. Excuse me, did we win the Senate? We won the Senate.
When the president brags that he won North Dakota and Indiana, he's in real trouble.
When I did.
Let me say this.
We did win North Dakota and Indiana.
So it got very contentious. By the way, Trump isn't wrong there. Chuck Schumer did a poor enough job in the Senate that his side lost seats in an election, a wave election in which they won the House vote by 8.6%. So, you know, President Trump says, and this is where he's good, he says, I won't take a deal without border security. Like, if you're going to give me a deal and it doesn't have border security, guess what? Not happening.
We have a proposal that Democrats and Republicans will support to do a CR that will not shut down the government. We urge you to take it.
And if it's not good border security, I won't take it.
It is very good border security.
And if it's not good border security, I won't take it.
Okay, well, Trump is exactly right on this. So, again, I think that Trump negotiating in front of the cameras is very often his best stuff because he looks strong. He makes him look tough. And he was being tough with Chuck Schumer. A lot of the back and forth had to do with Nancy Pelosi saying, well, if you guys run the House, you guys run the Senate, why don't you just pass a budget that you guys want? And Trump saying, well, I don't have 60 votes in the Senate. And Pelosi saying, well, you could at least vote in the House. And Trump going, I don't have 60 votes in the Senate. And Trump, of course, was right about all of this. You could see who sort of won this showdown, at least in the public mind, or at least in the public eye, by how the Democrats reacted to this. So Nancy Pelosi, after this whole hubbub, she went out to the press and she was basically whining that it had gone poorly for her. And she was doing her routine from Seinfeld, the jerk store routine, where she was insulted and then she thought of a comeback 30 minutes after the insult battle ended. Here was Nancy Pelosi saying, well, you know, I'm just so nice and kind. I didn't want to tell President Trump that he didn't know what he was talking about while there were cameras there. So now I'll tell all the cameras while he's not here that he didn't know what he was talking about.
We didn't want to contradict the president when he was putting forth figures that had no reality to them, no basis in fact. We have to, if we're going to proceed in all of this, have evidence-based, factual, truthful information about what works and what doesn't. I didn't want to, in front of those people, say, you don't know what you're talking about.
So I'll just say it in front of you, the press. I mean, I love the casual dishonesty of the Democrats saying, well, no, I just didn't want to say it in front of Trump. The reason she didn't want to say it in front of Trump is because Trump would have whomped her, because President Trump was not going to sit there and take it. Again, President Trump in confrontational situations is at his best when those confrontations are about politics. Right? President Trump's aggression in situations like this is actually quite a good thing. Now, does it necessarily feel good to a lot of establishment Republicans? No. But this is why a lot of President Trump's base likes President Trump, is because if Nancy Pelosi sits there and fibs about border security, or if Chuck Schumer sits there and says, I don't want to talk about this stuff publicly, and Trump says, we're going to talk about it publicly, you know, that's good for Trump, I think it's good for Republicans. Again, I don't think you should say you own the shutdown and give Democrats the headline. But still, I don't think this went poorly for President Trump by any stretch. Again, Nancy Pelosi looked very angry and very upset after this meeting. She says that she told Trump to pray for biblical wisdom, always a great injunction from a woman who believes that children should be killed in the womb.
I myself thought we would open the meeting with a prayer. And I told him about Solomon, King Solomon, when he was to become king of the Jews. He prayed to God. He said, how can I ever follow King David, King of the Jews? I need you to give me great understanding and wisdom, Lord. And after he prayed and prayed and prayed, God came to him and said, Solomon, because you did not ask for longevity, great wealth, or vengeance against your enemies, I will give you more wisdom than anyone has ever had, the wisdom of Solomon.
Okay, so I don't know how she's paraphrasing Bible here, but in any case, I'm sort of shocked that she didn't actually, I'm shocked she didn't actually quote the section of the Bible in which Solomon says that he might split a baby, because that seems actually more in line with Nancy Pelosi's general political viewpoint. I love it when people who are super pro-abortion are quoting the Bible at people like President Trump. It's delightful. Pelosi and Schumer finish off by saying that President Trump threw a temper tantrum in the Oval Office, and they called it the Trump shutdown. And this is where Trump's mistake starts to take root, is you're going to hear from now till the end of whatever happens here from the press that this is the Trump shutdown. Again, Trump didn't have to own it. That was a mistake by President Trump.
This Trump shutdown, this temper tantrum that he seems to throw, will not get him his wall, and it'll hurt a lot of people because he will cause a shutdown. He admitted he wanted a shutdown. It's hard to believe that he would want that.
Should unfortunately that the president choose to shut down the government, that we have a Trump shutdown as a Christmas present, a holiday present to the American people.
Well, they're on branding. I mean, this is their routine. So when it was Congress, it was Ted Cruz's fault when the government shut down in 2013 because he was in Congress. Now it's President Trump's fault that the government is shutting down when he's not in Congress. Weird how the media always try to spin it as a Republican shutdown of the government, even when Democrats are pretty obviously shutting down the government. Again, President Trump did not help here particularly a lot. We're going to get to Nancy Pelosi's final shots at President Trump in just 1 second. First, let's talk about the fact that at some point in the future, hopefully long time from today, you're going to plot. You're going to occupy that mahogany condo. And you want to make sure that your family is insured. You want to make sure that your family has the money to take care of themselves, that they're not going to simply bury you in a pauper's grave like Mozart, that you're not going to be lost to the history, that you can buy yourself a really nice mausoleum and the whole thing. You want to make sure that you got all those things. And life insurance can make sure that you have all of those things. But you don't want to think about death or life insurance, which is why you ought to go to Policy Genius right now. It's the easy way to get life insurance. In minutes, you can compare quotes from top insurers to find the coverage you need at a price you can afford. From there, you can apply online, and the unbiased advisors at Policy Genius will handle all the red tape, leaving you free to do the things you actually enjoy doing. Policy Genius doesn't just make life insurance easy. Whether you're shopping for disability insurance to protect your income, or homeowners insurance or auto insurance, they can help you get covered fast. If you've been intimidated or frustrated by insurance in the past, give Policy Genius a try. Just go to policygenius.com right now. Get your quotes, apply in minutes. You can do the whole thing on your phone right now. You can just pause the show. If you're listening to the podcast, you can just pause it. Go to Policy Genius, get your life insurance taken care of, and feel good about yourself. Policy Genius is the easy way to compare and buy life insurance. Go check it out right now, policygenius.com. Okay, Nancy Pelosi concluded the negotiations with President Trump by going back to her Democratic caucus and then talking about President Trump's manhood. These people are all civility and all class. She said, it's like a manhood thing with him, as if manhood can be associated with him. And then she said of the conversation with Trump, it goes to show you, you can get into a tinkle contest with a skunk. You get tinkle all over you. That's some weird verbiage. A tinkle contest with a skunk. You get tinkle all over you. Well, I guess when you are 1,000 years old, this is the kind of language that you use to describe a political club fight in the Oval Office. Again, here's the point. Democrats don't want to fund President Trump's priorities on the border. The question we should be asking ourselves is, why do they not actually want to be funding these border priorities? We're not talking about a lot of money. We're not talking about a great deal of expenditure. We're not talking about something impossible or crazy. It is not impossible or crazy to ensure that our border is secure. President Trump is talking about $5 billion. I mean, the government spends that about every 5 seconds. The fact that Democrats are trying to suddenly skimp on border security should be telling you something about their actual priorities. And I think President Trump knows that, which is why President Trump is pushing on this particular subject and pushing very hard on this particular subject. I don't think he's wrong to do it. And I think that now that he's got Democrats in the majority in the House, at least incoming, he has the ability to at least cast aspersions at their willingness to protect our southern border, which should be of serious concern. It should be of serious concern who crosses that border. Apparently, we've been arresting thousands of people every day crossing that border. Securing the border seems like a no-brainer. Trump knows it. The American people are in favor of it. And the fact that Democrats are willing to let people go unemployed for the holidays because they won't fund a border wall is pretty astonishing. That said, President Trump, should have done this when there was Republican Congress, and it is kind of devastating that he didn't. Okay, in just a second, I want to get to the latest developments in the Mueller investigation and in the Michael Flynn pleading. So here's the latest with regard to all of the various Trump legal developments. So according to Hans von Spakovsky, over at the Daily Signal Heritage Foundation, he talks about the possibility that President Trump will be indicted. So this entire week, a lot of last week, thanks to Michael Cohen's plea agreement and thanks to the Southern District of New York's sentencing memo, there's been a lot of talk the President of the United States is going to be indicted for campaign finance violation. Hans von Spakovsky makes the case that President Trump cannot be indicted for campaign finance violation because Michael Cohen didn't actually commit a campaign finance violation. Here's what Spakovsky says. He says, in fact, neither the Federal Election Commission, which is an independent agency tasked with enforcing the Federal Election Campaign Act, nor its former commissioners would likely agree with the over-aggressive view that the Southern District is taking. Indeed, the Southern District's aggressive stance on this issue might have violated the Justice Department's own policy. Why? Well, the initial claim is that Michael Cohen used money from his pocket to pay off Stormy Daniels and was reimbursed by President Trump in order to avoid disclosure issues in campaign finance. That basically this was an in-kind contribution to President Trump in the amount of $130,000 that was never reported to the FEC and surpassed all campaign finance limits. But Robert Khuzami, who's the acting U.S. attorney standing in for Jeffrey Berman, who's recused himself from the Cohen case, says in the government's sentencing memo that Cohen committed a campaign finance violation by arranging payments from corporations to two women. Women 1 and Woman 2, that'd be Karen McDougal and Stormy Daniels, who claimed they had affairs with Trump in order to buy their silence. Cohen eventually invoiced the Trump organization for the Daniels payment. Khuzami asserts these were illegal corporate contributions to the Trump campaign because they were made with the intent to influence the 2016 presidential election. But there are a lot of problems with this claim. First, his theory that anything intended to influence an election is a campaign-related expense fails to take into account the statutory limitation on this definition. According to federal elections law, it specifically says that campaign-related expenses do not include any expenditures used to fulfill any commitment, obligation, or expense of a person that would exist irrespective of the candidate's election campaign. These payments were relatively small given Trump's net worth, the kind of nuisance settlement celebrities often make to protect their reputations. Given Trump's celebrity status, the potential liability to these women existed irrespective of the president's election campaign. This is the case that I've made, is that Trump has been paying off women for years. This is just the latest example of a woman being paid off. Unlike Stormy Daniels and Karen McDougal in the John Edwards case, Rielle Hunter, who's Edwards' mistress, was paid $1 million while directly working for the campaign and John Edwards. Her payments did not go through the Edward campaign's account, but the government tried to claim they were campaign expenditures because they were intended to protect Edwards' reputation during his presidential run and thus influence the election. But a jury acquitted Edwards on the charge of accepting an illegal campaign donation and failed to reach a verdict on the other charges. The fact that a jury didn't convict Edwards wouldn't ordinarily mean the government didn't have a viable claim, but Edwards had two former chairmen of the FEC on retainer who were prepared to testify that such payments to a mistress are not actually campaign-related expenses. So this is the affirmative case being made by Hans von Spakovsky as to why President Trump cannot actually be prosecuted in terms of violation of campaign finance. Now, in other President Trump legal news, the incoming New York Attorney General has now said that she is interested in prosecuting any and all members of the Trump family. I mean, this is pretty incredible stuff. It's pretty obvious at this point that law enforcement mechanisms are being used to target specific people. As Ari Fleischer pointed out on Twitter, and he's exactly correct, the former Bush press secretary, the way that law enforcement is supposed to work is you identify a crime, and then you identify the person responsible for the crime, and then you prosecute the person responsible for the crime. But now it appears that the prosecutor, the Attorney General-elect in New York, is saying that she's going to identify the person and then identify the crime. This would be the definition of selective prosecution. New York Attorney General-elect Letitia James says she plans to launch sweeping investigations into President Donald Trump, his family, and anyone in his circle who may have violated the law once she settles into her new job next month. She said, "We'll use every area of the law to investigate President Trump and his business transactions and that of his family as well." She, of course, is a Democrat, and she told NBC News in her first extensive interview since she was elected last month that she intends on targeting Trump and his family. This would include investigating any potential illegalities involving President Trump's real estate holdings in New York, the June 2016 Trump Tower meeting with a Russian official, government subsidies received by President Trump, whether he's in violation of the Emoluments Clause in the U.S. Constitution, continuing to probe the Trump Foundation and supposed illegalities in their handling of their 501c3. James says, we want to investigate anyone in his orbit who has, in fact, violated the law. This is pretty astonishing stuff. To openly say that you are taking on a specific human as opposed to a specific crime, that is a basic violation of prosecutorial duty. James said, taking on President Trump and looking at all of violations of law, I think, is no match to what I have seen in my lifetime. And this is, if you're wondering why so many Republicans feel that the justice system looks like it's being used as a tool against President Trump, statements like that certainly have something to do with it. I'm going to explain more about the use of the justice system against certain Trump officials in just 1 second. First, let's talk about how you're sending your packages this Christmas. So I know you're going to be sending out enormous numbers of gifts to family and friends. It's going to cost you a fortune just to drive that stuff over to the post office. And then you have to stand in line with all of these gifts and these boxes and the whole spiel. Instead, why don't you just do it from home with Stamps.com? It brings all the great services of the U.S. Postal Office directly to your desktop. You can buy and print official U.S. postage for any letter, any package, any class of mail using your own computer and printer, and then the mail carrier picks it up. No trips to the post office required. Could not be easier. You print postage any day, anytime. Stamps.com is always open. And not only does Stamps.com save you time, it saves you money, because Stamps.com helps you print the right amount of postage every time, so you never overpay again, and you get discounts on postage you can't even get at the post office. We use Stamps.com here at the Daily Wire offices. It saves us time. It saves us money. Stamps.com is a great gift you can give yourself this holiday season. Right now, you can get a special deal with Stamps.com that includes a 4-week trial plus postage and a digital scale without long-term commitments. Doesn't get much better than that. Go to Stamps.com, click on the microphone at the top of the homepage, and type in promo code Shapiro. That is Stamps.com. Again, enter promo code Shapiro, and when you do so, you will get that special deal, a 4-week trial plus postage and a digital scale without long-term commitments. Go check it out right now, Stamps.com. Again, use that promo code Shapiro for the special deal. The services of the post offices direct at your fingertips. Just fantastic stuff. Go check it out right now. Stamps.com, promo code Shapiro. Okay, meanwhile, the FBI, there's a new memo out that shows that the FBI recommended that Michael Flynn, who you will recall was prosecuted by the Department of Justice, that he not have a lawyer present during his interview and did not warn him that his statement would have consequences. So according to a memo from former FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe, the interview that ultimately led to Michael Flynn's guilty plea on one count of making false statements, this is where Michael Flynn said he had not talked with the Russians during the transition, suggested that Flynn not have a lawyer present at the session according to newly filed court documents. In addition, FBI officials, along with the two agents who interviewed Flynn, decided specifically not to warn him that there would be penalties for making false statements because the agents wanted to ensure that Flynn was relaxed during the session. The new information was drawn from McCabe's account of events, plus FBI agents' write-ups of the interview, the so-called 302 report. It's contained in a sentencing memo filed Tuesday by Flynn's defense team. Citing McCabe's account, the sentencing memo says that shortly after noon on January 24th, the fourth day of the new Trump administration, McCabe called Flynn on a secure phone in Flynn's West Wing office. The two men discussed business briefly, and then McCabe said he felt that we needed to have two of our agents sit down with Flynn to discuss Flynn's talks with Russian officials during the presidential transition. McCabe, by his own account, urged Flynn to talk to the agents alone without a lawyer present. I explained I thought the quickest way to get this done was to have a conversation between Flynn and the agents only, said McCabe. I further stated that Lieutenant General Flynn wished to include anyone else in the meeting, like the White House counsel, for instance, that I would need to involve the Department of Justice. Flynn stated this would not be necessary and agreed to meet with the agents without any additional participants. Within 2 hours, the agents were in Flynn's office. According to the 302 report quoted in Flynn's sentencing document, the agent said Flynn was relaxed and jocular and offered the agents a little tour of his part of the White House. The agents did not provide General Flynn with a warning of the penalties for making false statements under 18 U.S. Code 1001 before, during, or after the interview, according to the Flynn memo. According to the 302, before the interview, McCabe and other FBI officials decided the agents would not warn Flynn it was a crime to lie during the FBI interview because they wanted Flynn to be relaxed and they were concerned that giving the warnings might adversely affect the rapport. Now, is that bad behavior by the agents? Unclear, right? I mean, the fact is that when you're a police officer and you're interviewing a suspect, you have to inform them of their right to have an attorney present if you have arrested them. But if you're just bringing a witness in for questioning, then you don't actually have to warn them of the possibility of lying to the police being a crime, right? You just have to, you just have to interview them. So that's the basic rule is that if you're not in detention, then you don't have a right to an attorney under domestic United States law. This is sort of the same case. So the FBI doesn't have to warn Flynn that he can have an attorney present, or that any statements that he says can and will be used against him in a court of law, like you would on Law and Order. Miranda warnings don't apply to this particular situation. That said, does it sound a little bit dishonest for the FBI to have brought in Flynn under the auspices of we're having a friendly little conversation and then sandbag him with false charges? Yeah, especially when you get him on something as minor as he talked with the Russians in the middle of the transition, which is not in and of itself criminal activity. This is why a lot of folks are upset today. Again, I think the upset is a little bit overwrought, but I understand why folks think that the same thing would not have been done to any Obama officials, for example. Now, meanwhile, there was a terrorist attack in France, another one, and it did not make global headlines in the same way that terrorist attacks have in the past. The reason being that we are getting used to this, unfortunately. According to the Daily Mail, at least 3 people were killed, 13 others injured when a gunman opened fire at a Christmas market in Strasbourg, northeastern France, on Tuesday evening. Police identified the gunman as Sheriff Chekat, a Strasbourg-born 29-year-old who has a criminal record and is a designated threat to the state on the Security Services watch list. A manhunt is now underway for Chekat, who managed to flee the scene in a hijacked taxi after being wounded in a shootout with soldiers, and President Emmanuel Macron has raised France's terror level. The carnage unfolded just after 8 p.m. local time outside the historic Christmas market in Strasbourg's central square, Place Kléber, one of the busiest areas in the city, which is also home to the European Parliament. 4 of the people injured were still fighting for their lives. 6 others seriously hurt. Witnesses described one of the victims as a male Southeast Asian tourist who had been shot in the head. The guy apparently was on the terror watch list. So this person was known to police. I don't know why the Europeans have this terror watch list where apparently you only appear after you've committed an act of terror, and then we apparently worry about it. He was on the terror watch list, and apparently while he was shooting, he said the magic words. He said Allahu Akbar while he was shooting. Motive still unknown. So that's always exciting, is when you hear that somebody shouts Allahu Akbar while shooting people, and we still have motive unknown. So the source, police source, said security forces had opened fire in an area of the city where the suspect was thought to be hiding. The source did not give the address. It was unclear if the shooter had been located. So good stuff. Again, another radical Islamist terrorist attack in the heart of Europe, and yet you're considered Islamophobic if you wonder whether immigration to Europe ought to be vetted or curbed. If you do that, then you have a problem. Instead, we're all supposed to sort of plunge our heads into the sand and pretend that nothing threatening has ever happened because of mass Islamic immigration into Europe, which is, of course, silly. And that's not to say the vast majority of people who are coming into Europe are criminals or terrorists. They're not. But if you're not vetting the folks coming into your country, then it should not be a surprise when some of those people turn out to be bad people, terrorists, threats to public security. Now, meanwhile, Google showed up on the Hill for a hearing yesterday. And whenever tech companies show up on the Hill for hearings about how they run their business, it gets really awkward because nobody in Congress is below the age of 97, except for Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who is 29 and knows nothing. But everybody else in Congress is like, there's a huge age gap. It's basically you're 97 or you're 29 and know nothing. So there's no point at which people actually know things in Congress. All these 97-year-olds were grilling the heads of Google on the biasing of Google results. And they clearly do not know what they are talking about. Like over and over and over, they were just saying silly things. So, for example, Steve Cohen, who is a Democratic representative from Tennessee, here he was saying that he's angry at Google because when he Googles himself, mean things come up in the Google results.
Like I put my name in here, Rep. Steve Cohen, I Punch News. This weekend, I was on MSNBC 4 times. And yet, the first thing that comes up is the Daily Caller, not exactly a liberal, but I guess well-known group. Then Roll Call, then Breitbart News, then the Memphis Business Journal, then Breitbart News, then Breitbart. So it looks like you are overly using conservative news organizations on your news. And I'd like you to look into overuse of conservative news organizations to put on liberal people's news on Google.
Okay, maybe the only people who give a crap what Steve Cohen says are people on the right because the left basically ignores them. Now, Cohen was saying this because there were folks on the right who were claiming that Google was biased against conservatives in a lot of its search results. Now, we here at the Daily Wire know that Google is biased against conservatives in some of its search results. There was a while there where Google had an app, basically. It had a section of its website where if you searched Daily Wire, then all the results from a left-wing fact-checking organization came up on the right side of the page. And it did the same thing for the Daily Caller. It did the same thing for the Federalist. It did not do the same thing for any left-wing website. It did not fact-check any of their stories and show how dishonest those websites were. And by the way, over at Daily Wire, when we make mistakes, we make corrections to those mistakes, just as any other news organization would. But nobody in Congress seems to understand exactly how all of this works. And so the members of Congress simply suggest that Google is absolutely neutral. Google has no bias whatsoever. In a second, we're going to talk a little bit more about that and why that simply is not true. First, let's talk about your Second Amendment rights. So when the founders crafted the Constitution, the first thing they did was to make sacred the rights of the individual to share ideas without limitation by the government. The second thing the founders did was make sure that you could protect those rights in armed fashion. Bravo Company Manufacturing was started in a garage by a Marine vet more than 2 decades ago to build a professional-grade product that meets combat standards. BCM believes the same level of protection should be provided to every American, regardless of whether they are a private citizen or a professional. BCM is not a sporting arms company. They design, they engineer, and they manufacture life-saving equipment. They assume that every rifle leaving their shop will have to be used in a life-or-death situation by a responsible citizen or a law enforcement officer or a soldier overseas. I believe in the Second Amendment not because I'm a hunter. I'm not. I don't believe in the Second Amendment because I like sport shooting, because I don't really have time. I believe in the Second Amendment because I want to be able to protect myself and my family and my values and my country, and that's what BCM believes too. Every component of a BCM rifle is hand-assembled and tested by Americans to a life-saving standard. They feel a moral responsibility to provide tools that will not fail the user when it's not just a paper target, but God forbid, somebody coming to do harm. To learn more about Bravo Company Manufacturing, head on over to BravoCompanyMFG.com, and you can discover more about their products, special offers, upcoming news. That's BravoCompanyMFG.com. If you need more convincing, go check them out over at YouTube.com/BravoCompanyUSA. When you do, then you can see all of the great products and services they provide. And also you can see the cool guys who founded the company. It's really awesome. Find out more about BCM again, youtube.com/BravoCompanyUSA, or check them out at BravoCompanyMFG.com. Really, they are spectacular. Go check them out right now. Okay, well, I do want to talk more about Google's bias. Also, a piece in the Washington Post suggesting that I should not actually speak at the March for Life, and a piece at Vox suggesting that women have better sex under socialism, which is why women are prostituting themselves in Venezuela, I suppose. We'll get to all of that in just a second. First, you're going to have to go subscribe over at Daily Wire. You get the rest of this show live, Cleveland Show live, Michael Knowles' show live, and come January, 2 more hours of me every day behind the paywall. So if you love the show, but you want more in-depth exploration, or things break later in the day, you want to check it out. Go check it out right now. $9.99 a month, $99 a year for all of those aforementioned glories, plus this, the very greatest in beverage vessels. Look at this. Look at this massive piece of vesselware. It is just spectacular in every, the best, the most beautiful, unbelievable, unreal, great. Go check it out right now. Also, please subscribe over at YouTube and iTunes, and you get access to our Sunday special. Our latest Sunday special features Bishop Robert Barron. We had a great conversation about theology and faith. I know, a lot of faith-based Sunday specials this month because, come on, it's Advent. So go check that out right now. Here's a little bit of Bishop Robert Barron.
This is Bishop Robert Barron. Tune in this Sunday to the Ben Shapiro Sunday Special program. We talk about lots of interesting things, from God and religion, society to morality. I think you'll find the conversation really interesting.
It was a really interesting conversation. You're going to want to check that out this Sunday. It's really a lot of fun. We have some great Sunday specials coming up in the very near future. I mean, great ones. So go subscribe over at iTunes and YouTube. Leave us a review. We always appreciate it. We are the largest, fastest growing conservative podcast in the nation.